So just while the recording is getting ready to start, I'm just going to share my screen so that hopefully everybody can see it when we get there. Okay, so it's your last lesson with me tonight, and the information that I need to go through for this lesson is going to be the effective handling of information in health and social care settings. It's probably one of the smaller units compared to the first two that you've already done, which is always nice to hear. So it's got some law in it again that we looked at in some of the earlier units, to be fair. So I'm hoping that some of it will make sense, really. We need to talk about how we handle information, particularly with the information that we would get from patients and patients' relatives in particular, because it might be that for whatever reason we're given sensitive information that we need to look after appropriately. We also need to look at what confidentiality means to us. It is hard within healthcare because, of course, you adopt a multidisciplinary approach. So it might be that you have to talk to a lot of different people, but it is about making sure that those that are given the information are given it on a need-to-know basis, so that there is a real reason why you've been able to give them that information. So let's get started then. Okay, so the first bit then. So within the legislation and code of practice, what can you think of that relates to how you're going to handle information? Is it a law? And if you think it is a law, what law do you think it might be covered by? So yes, it is. There is quite a few different ones here as well. So you've got the Data Protection Act. We actually currently use the 2018 one, the original one that you may still see posters floating around in the workplace. The original date would be 1998. It did change in 2018 because we had quite a big change within the United Kingdom with regards to our data protection. And the reason why is we got something called GDPR, which I think a lot of people got used to the term after a while, but perhaps don't know what GDPR stands for. So that's General Data Protection Regulations. The reason why 2018 it was a crucial year in particular, this came in because of Brexit. Because we were coming away from mainland Europe, we weren't going to be governed by the data protection laws anymore that related to Europe, because they do view data slightly different than we perhaps do in the United Kingdom. It also was around the same time that the Facebook scandal had hit the news, where they've been accused of selling all our data off to a company called Cambridge Analytica. And as we now know, that was proven to be a true allegation, you know, and so they in effect broke the law really with all our data. How it relates to you within health and social care, and what really that you need to be aware of at this stage, is that any organisation must have a data protection policy. So if we just put that out into the wider working environment, really, I mean, that's not just health and social care, that would be anywhere that you've given your data to. So if you just think about your own personal life, so it could be if you've gone to the hairdressers. So the hairdresser, if they've made an appointment with you and they have your name and phone number, they have your data. Any organisation where you've given perhaps bank details to, so if you're setting up a direct debit to pay for your bill, maybe pay for your gas and electric bill or your council tax or even your rent or something like that, your landlord's then responsible for the data that you've given to them. So they've got your name, your date of birth. If you've signed a contract with them, that also is data that you have given to them. And you are expecting that they are going to look after it correctly for you. And if they're not, or if you suspect that they're not, then it is something that you can actually report to the organisation, and the fines are quite considerable. They can be up to 6 figures for some organisations, because if they are found to have breached data protection in particular, when the police investigate and get involved in the situation, if it is proven that the allegations are true, the maximum fine, I think, is something like 8% of the annual turnover of the organisation, or a set figure, like whichever one is greater. Well, 8% of the turnover, if you're a multi-million-pound company, it could be quite a lot of money. Cases historically where people have been found to breach data, Facebook, like I said earlier, but even there has been health and social care organisations. So perhaps where there was a case a couple of years ago now where somebody, I believe it was a nurse or might have even been a doctor actually, left a laptop on a train that contained all their patients' contact details and all their medical records, basically. The laptop, for some strange reason, wasn't encrypted, whereas they normally are within the NHS. And the person that found the laptop was able to then open it, access it, and was privy to all this really confidential information. So it's something that shouldn't have happened. There are policies and procedures in place so that that wouldn't happen. It was just a really strange event. I remember when it was in the paper. But of course, the NHS that individual works for is who actually got fined for the data breach, even though it might have been an individual's actions, because the organisation itself is responsible for making sure all that data is safe and protected. It's the organisation ultimately that will pay the fine in that situation. So, I mean, even if this is a small, tiny independent business, so I'm trying to think, probably this like a small local news agents or something like that. If it's something as simple as perhaps you have a newspaper delivered every day, or maybe even just at the weekend, if the newspaper shop's got your name and your address and you're paying them to have your papers delivered, if they're writing it down in just like an old-fashioned notebook maybe and leaving it by the till or something like that, they are not protecting your data correctly. And I know it kind of sounds menial, and I know when I teach this to my other students, they just say, really, are people really that bothered? Well, yes, they are, because the data actually belongs to the individual. It doesn't belong to the organisation. And that's something is really important to remember in healthcare. Patients at any time are allowed to view their whole medical record, particularly now with apps on your smartphones. We have one called Patient Access. I have it on my phone. And through Patient Access, I can view my whole medical record and see whatever's been written about me. It's particularly handy if I'm going away on holiday and it asks if I've had a certain vaccination so that I can travel to that country and meet the visa requirements. I can't remember sometimes what year I had my vaccination or if my tetanus jab is up to date. So I can, instead of bothering the GP and trying to ring reception, I can now just go on Patient Access, have a look and go, yep, I did have it, or no, my booster's due. I need to ring and get that booked in. Particularly useful during COVID, obviously, because we needed to make sure there was a lot of countries that wouldn't let you travel into the country unless you could prove that you'd had your COVID vaccine, particularly when we were on multiple ones. I mean, I'm on injection number 4 now, so I make sure if anybody asks me, I can just show it to them. It can generate a QR code that somebody can scan, and it just proves that I've said, yes, I've had my vaccine, and they can see exactly which one it was that I had and when I had it. So as I've already said, who does the data belong to? This sometimes sometimes people struggle to understand, and sometimes when patients are busy, they're giving you their life story, and you're busy writing it all down in the notes. It's when you actually say to them, if they say, can I see what you've written? And when you say, yeah, of course you can, because it's your data, and they sort of look at you, and then because they've said to me before, yeah, but you've written it down. I went, yeah, but I'm just writing down what you're telling me. It's your data. It belongs to you. It's all about you. It's all of your information. It belongs to you. And actually, at any time, if you've given your information to a company, maybe I'm trying to think what I've done today. So I've had to insure my car today. My car insurance was due. So I've given all this information to the company, and I've left the previous company because the renewal price was absolutely disgusting. I was like, no, I'm going to shop around and I'm sure I can get it cheaper, which I did. So I've said to the previous company, you can now remove all my data. I do not authorise you to keep it. I'm not a customer of yours anymore. There is absolutely no reason for my information to stay on your database. Remove it. And that is my legal right. The company cannot refuse to keep that. The only time sometimes in health and social care where it could be difficult is if you said that to your GP, but your GP says, but you're my patient and I need to keep all your information on record so that I've got your full patient history, so that I can see if you are on any medication, or actually if I want to give you a new medication, are you allergic to anything that's going to be in that medication? Is there going to be a problem? What was your last blood pressure? Did I weigh you 6 months ago? If so, what was your weight? you know, and if you said to an organisation like that, you've got to remove everything, it would be very hard for the health and social care practitioner to be able to treat that individual. So that there are certain times where you could ask for someone to be removed, but in reality, there's going to be certain information that they can't. But for something like your car insurance, if you are not using that company anymore, they have no legal right to hold on to your information. You can make a written request to have them remove it. A lot of the time now, normally as you're leaving a company like that, they'll say, we're going to delete your data automatically. And then they normally send a follow-up email after it's been done. There's another piece of law here and another piece of legislation that you need to be careful of as a health and social care practitioner. So it's something called Freedom of Information Act, and it came in the year 2000. So it came in just at the start of the millennium. Freedom of Information Act is that an individual can write to any organisation, and they do something called a Freedom of Information Act request. So they're requesting all the information that that organisation has written about them. Now, for health and social care, to be fair, because we're quite generous with sharing the information if we need to with the patient, why wouldn't we? It's their information. But you would have to do a Freedom of Information request to your perhaps local hospital in the event of a death of a loved one. So it might be a partner, a child, a sibling, a parent, a grandparent. If you are suspicious that perhaps something hasn't happened correctly, or you are concerned that there has been a serious error that has led to the untimely death of somebody that is close to you, that is within your family, you could make a Freedom of Information Request Act to the hospital or the care provider that's looked after them, and you can ask for the release of their medical records. You have to have a legitimate reason to see it. So if it might be your ex-husband or your ex-wife, for example, and you've seen them go into the hospital and you think, oh, I wonder what's wrong with them, I'll do a Freedom of Information request and just try and find out to do a bit of snooping. No, that's not allowed. But if it is the death of a loved one, so if anything had happened to a parent in particular, and you say to the hospital, I just don't understand how they've passed away, because when they came into the hospital, yes, they were unwell, but it was not something that was enough for them to lose their life. So I want to understand what's happened while they've been here, because perhaps I don't understand how this has happened. Did you provide the right care? Was it delivered in a timely fashion? You know, in other words, how long did they wait for certain treatments or for even surgeries or certain medications? What was the patient pathway? What did it look like? From the hospital's point of view, we do get these quite a lot, actually, to be fair. Sometimes people are just, for whatever reason, they're not sure what's happened to somebody that's been looked after in our care. I mean, I think I've said to you guys definitely in a previous lecture, so my local hospital, so we're a trust actually, the local trust that I've worked for and I still continue to work for when I get free time, is involved in quite a large criminal investigation at the moment for maternity. It's a big maternity scandal area, so they are under investigation. It's quite a big investigation because it has been going on for quite a few years already, and we're still not at the bottom of it. It is unexplained and untimely child death. So and during delivery of babies in particular. So it is all around maternity. There's nothing suspicious on the child wards or any of the adult wards. It is solely maternity. We've had quite a damning report written at the interim where they've gone in and investigated it originally. It did make local news and actually made national news as well, because I saw it on the BBC and also on ITN. So it is something that is going to rumble on for quite a few years as well, I would think, because we're not just talking about one or two babies that have sadly passed away. We're talking about quite a considerable number as well. So it has developed into a full investigation, as quite rightly it should do. But of course, the solicitors are acting for the grieved parents have had to do the Freedom of Information Act request for every single baby that they are concerned that died prematurely, or perhaps was a death that was unexpected or unexplained. So it's a mass amount of paperwork that the solicitors are having to sift through. But it is right that they get all the information that they need to be able to hopefully find out why this is happening, and then to put absolutely every measure in place that you can think of to stop it from happening. Because with the best medicine that we've got at the moment, situations like this shouldn't really be happening on a day-to-day basis. The other place to be aware of where how we handle information, where you may see it written and may think, right, okay, that's the remit then that I need to work towards and make sure that I'm upholding this at all times. It is within the codes of practice. And I know that we've looked at code of practice previously, so hopefully you can remember what the code of practice is about. You don't have to read all of it, but you are expected to know the key points that are within it. And certainly at the point when you're writing your assignments, you should be referencing the code of practice really at all times. Our code of practices are there to not only protect all the patients, but also to protect us as individuals that are working within health and social care. If we have done our job correctly and we have worked within our code of practice, technically, nothing should ever go wrong. That is technically speaking, but sometimes it doesn't work like that, and sometimes events do happen. But as long as you have followed your code of practice, you should, in theory, you should have a certain level of protection, because you've done what you should be doing and you've done it correctly. And the idea is that the code is there to support you. For those that don't want to be nurses or midwives, for those that want to be either paramedics or physiotherapies or occupational therapy, radiography like me, then you have your HCPC code of practice. And as I've said on a previous lesson, very, very similar wording, very similar key areas are covered in both codes of practice, because it doesn't really matter where you work in healthcare. You are going to be looking after the individuals in the same way, and you're certainly going to be looking after their data in the same way as well. Okay, so here is the actual wording that's in the code of conduct. So it's actually in section 10 about all the data. Now, there's things there that really shouldn't be a surprise to you. I mean, the top one, keep clear and accurate records relevant to your practice. I mean, absolutely. If you have given your patient, if you've read their care plan and it says they need 2 paracetamol every 4 hours, so you've gone and given the 2 paracetamol to the patient, you're going to document in the care plan, Mr. Jones has had his paracetamol at 6:25 on the 1st of July. And you sign it, you put your PIN number on it, and that's it, done. That's what that means, okay? You've not omitted anything. So in other words, you haven't forgotten to put something in. So perhaps you forgot to date it, or you forgot to put the time, or you haven't put your PIN number on, or maybe you just didn't say what medication they had. If patients are on multiple medications, sometimes I've seen in patients' notes, people just put patient had their medication. Well, which one? If they're on 4 or 5 different items, which one did they have? And if you then say, well, they had all of it, are you absolutely sure that they had all of it? Because you haven't documented what they've had. You've just said very, very blasé, yes, they've had their medication. But which one? It might seem that it's nitpicking, but the problem is, if something happened to that patient, say for some strange reason, they had an allergic reaction to the medication, even though they've been on this medication for a while maybe. If that case ends up in a court of law, and don't forget, a coroner's court is still classed as a court of law, and you're there to give evidence, and the judge is saying to you, did you give your patient the medication? And you're looking at your notes and it says here that they had all their medication, and the judge is saying, but what did that actually mean? What did that look like? And what did you physically give them? If you're then saying, I can't remember, or I'm not sure, or I didn't actually witness them take it, if it's a tablet or a liquid, then you become legally liable, and that is where it becomes difficult for you. If you are not keeping accurate records, it is well within the NMC's remit that they can actually remove your PIN number from you. So in other words, your right to practice, they will remove it. They will say that you're unsafe. It might be that you need to go for retraining. You absolutely will then have to go under supervision, where a more senior, more qualified individual will spend a lot of time with you and basically watch everything that you're doing, making sure that your notes are being fully documented, making sure that the patient is getting the medication that they're meant to be having. Nobody really wants to be under that situation. You know, a lot of people say to me, how do you have time to do everything? You know, on a busy shift where everything, you've got alarms going all the time. You know, you might be looking after one patient and then all of a sudden there's a cardiac arrest and you have to run to the emergency. How do you remember? It is hard, you know, it is a busy environment, but the trouble is you have to remember, because at the end of the day, if it is something that you can risk losing your professional registration for, you have to make time for it. You have to. We say with all patient notes within the hospital, they should be completed in a timely manner. In other words, the moment you finish doing something, before you start the next job, document whatever it is you've done. So if you have changed a wound dressing for a patient, or you've removed some surgical staples from a patient, document what you've done. The patient note should be there with you while you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. And the idea is at the moment you finished, you can then do it straight away. The beauty of technology is a lot of the time now, when I go into the hospitals, we have iPads. And so the moment we're finishing doing something, we can access it electronically straight away. It's done, it's digitally signed, so it's got my PIN number. I can just press a button and it's gone. And then I know that I've done it. And equally, because of technology making things like this quicker, there is even more no excuse now to not be documenting your records correctly. The number of times I've gone to court and I've had to give evidence because I've been investigating somebody, and you say to the individual, did you do this? And they look at the patient notes and go, I can't remember, or I'm not sure, or I don't think that's my writing. I think that's whoever I was working with that night. Well, who were you working with that night? I can't remember, you know, and it gets very difficult. The average time in the United Kingdom that it takes for a court case to actually get to court can be up to 18 months. And if you're like me, I can't remember what I did 18 days ago, let alone 18 months ago. This is why paperwork in particular is such a priority for all staff, really, not just nurses, not just paramedics, you know, really anybody that comes into contact with that patient. If the patient has told you something that is relevant, you must document it. Any sort of patient care must be documented. And it doesn't even have to be in a hospital. This goes for all the community nurses, this goes for all the care homes and the residential homes and the nursing homes, all the GP surgeries, even, you know, when you go to the dentist, if you just go even for a checkup, your dentist is making notes on what they've done. They're updating your gums, they're updating your teeth. If they think, oh, you haven't had an x-ray for a while, let's get another one done. So they're holding all of that on file for you. The other bit that the Code of Conduct is saying, as you can see there's some extra points that it's then expanded on. I find it very sad that they have to put in the Code of Conduct, but there's clearly a reason why they have to put it in the Code of Conduct. It's actually, where did I see it? Number 10.3, complete all records accurately, yep, but without any falsification. So in other words, don't lie. And then it says there, take immediate and appropriate action if you become aware that someone has not kept to these requirements. In other words, if you think somebody is making false records for whatever reason, you absolutely must report it. And actually, as we get to the point, if the NMC do start to investigate, if they find out that there is a qualified nurse or midwife that was aware that somebody was making false notes, false patient records, and didn't report it, they themselves can actually lose their registration. You know, and I've seen this happen professionally. You know, I've been in court with individuals as the case has unfolded, because I always work for the prosecution. I never work for the defence. So if I'm there because I've got evidence or there's something that I believe is relevant. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been contacted and asked to go to court in the first place. And when you sit and watch them, sometimes it is really sad, because sometimes there's a very naive, often a newly qualified, that sits there and says, you know, I didn't realise that's what they were doing in the notes. but you didn't check it. And actually, if you had checked the notes, you would have realised, one, that there'd been an error, two, it possibly is a false error. So in other words, they're doing it deliberately for whatever reason, or they're trying to cover something up. I never forget, I had a case, probably now, 2023, isn't it? So probably about 10, 11 years ago, maybe even 12 now, actually. And when we got all the way to court, it was for a patient that sadly had passed away. So I've been instructed by the family to do the investigation. And we went to court and we sat and went through everything. And as the nurse, because it was a nurse that was on trial, was giving evidence, as they opened the patient note, you could see her looking at the notes, and then you could sort of see her like looking really like intent at the paperwork, to the point I actually said to her, is there something wrong with the notes? And she said, well, yes, there is actually. So of course everybody looked and said, well, what's the problem with the notes? And she said, well, there's Tipp-Ex in these notes, and we're not allowed to use Tipp-Ex. You might know it as whiteout. We're not allowed to use it, it's banned. Because the whole point is, if you've made a mistake, you're meant to put a line through it and sign, so that in a case like this, you could still read what the mistake was and then see the steps that were taken to correct it. But you shouldn't use Tipp-Ex. And she said, and she was very adamant actually, and she said, I don't use Tipp-Ex. I don't even carry it. It's not something I would ever have on my uniform. And to be fair, because it is banned in our hospital, we wouldn't have it at the nurses' station. It wouldn't be in any of the offices. We are just not allowed it. It's just something that doesn't happen. So of course we then had to pause at that point to do a little bit more of an investigation, because clearly somebody had brought Tipp-Ex in because it was there in the notes, and we didn't know at what point had that happened. Had the Tipp-Ex appeared after the patient had passed away, before the patient had passed away? We just didn't know. So it took a long time. I think the case was paused for about 4 months while we tried to get to the bottom of that. Again, going back to what I said earlier, the fact that we have electronic notes now, if you've made a mistake, and you know what it's like when you're typing, sometimes your brain's running a bit faster than your fingers are, and as you look at the screen, you're like, oh, I've made some spelling mistakes, and you can correct it. Because the trouble is, the moment you press at the bottom and say, yep, my notes are complete, it locks the document. Once the document is locked, you can't make any changes to it. And that is good that is the case. However, if you then look at it and go, oh no, I can't believe it, I've made a mistake, that's fine. You press a button to open a second box, and then you explain, this is to correct the information above. I've realised in hindsight I've made a mistake, and then you put the correction in, and then it will allow both records to go through onto the patient's notes. And that's what you want to happen, because it will be time and date stamped electronically, which is something that you can't override and you can't change. That if in the event of a serious situation, they will be able to look at the data and say, no, the time and date shows that it happened literally a split second after the first lot of notes were created. Therefore, I'm not suspicious. I believe it's true and factual. I don't believe it's anything that we need to be concerned about. So the HCPC Code of Conduct, again, as I said earlier, it's very, very similar in wording to the NMC. It doesn't mention GDPR though, is something, and I think that might be because the Code of Conduct for them is due for review. I thought it was due for review in 2023, I've got to be honest, so I'm wondering, I don't think it hasn't come out yet though, because I would have had an email to say it's come out. It might come out in the winter months, because I know review date tends to be around October possibly. So I'll go away and look into that. And actually, if the new one has come out already and it mentions it, then I'll make sure I upload it to your Teams page. But at the time when I wrote this PowerPoint, I only wrote this the other day, and I'm sure when I looked, GDPR wasn't in it. But anyway, if it's not, even if it's not in it, data is data, and it did clearly talk about data and was explaining what it is that is your requirement for taking data off a patient. The other part of data, something that is very crucial in health and social care, and I've put it there at the top, you have to document that you got the patient's consent. And I know that this sounds silly. If a patient has come into your clinical area Perhaps you're working in phlebotomy that day, so you're going to take blood from a patient. Patient needs a blood test. The patient comes in, rolls their sleeve up and gives you their arm. Is that them consenting? Technically, it's a non-verbal consent, yeah. But before I put the actual needle in the patient, I say to them, I'm just about to take some blood. Is that okay? And the patient goes, yep, that's fine. So I must document after I've got my vial of blood out of the patient consented to this procedure, 1 vial taken, 2 vials, 3, 4, whatever, and then send them off to have the cross-matching done. That's how you must document the notes. You know, you must say that the patient's consented to it. When you share the relevant information where appropriate with colleagues, I mean, as I said earlier, it is on a need-to-know basis. So it should only be shared with people that are directly involved with the care of that patient. So it's not for gossiping in the coffee queue at the canteen to say, oh, guess who's just been in again with, I don't know, a broken leg or something. And I'm a bit worried that it's somebody in the house that's doing it to them. Or no, absolutely not. And again, if you are caught sharing data in an unconfidential way like that, you could lose your professional registration. And actually, there's been quite a few cases, worryingly, where people have lost their registration in that way, where they have been reported for disclosing personal secrets with friends, family, without their permission. Because both my parents are elderly parents, and they both know that I work in medical education. In other words, I teach, and I teach quite a lot. I have written consent from both of my parents that if I am talking about something about them or something about their health conditions or anything like that, I have their consent. But both my parents equally understand that at any point they can withdraw that consent. You know, if they say to me, no, I don't want you to tell your students about that, or that it happened to me, or whatever, then they would withdraw their consent. My mum and dad always will spend time supporting the teaching of future healthcare professionals, because they have reached that age where they are starting to need healthcare support. Both of them come into my college regularly, actually, to be patients so that students can practice on them. But also, my mum in particular is a breast cancer survivor. We are now 12, 13 years, I think, actually maybe even nearly 14 years since she's beaten the disease. So she comes in quite regularly and speaks to the students about her diagnosis, like how it was found, because it was found by accident, her treatment and everything that she went through. She is quite happy for it to be discussed, because she knows that it's a teaching aid, and because it is within the confines of a lesson such as tonight's lesson, she's happy with that. If I was shouting it on public transport, or perhaps going somewhere where my mum's friends are or something like that, and she doesn't want that information to be shared, then absolutely it wouldn't be shared. And even as her own daughter, if I was sharing something without her permission and she chose to report me, absolutely would I be in trouble for that. I don't get any special extra, you know, free reign just because I'm her daughter and actually I'm her next of kin. It doesn't work like that. Even as power of attorney or anything like that, you don't get this extra level to the patient's data, because still, again, the data belongs to the individual. The only time that it would change would be, of course, the point that my parents pass away. Then, of course, they can't consent for their data to be discussed anymore. But I mean, my mum and dad have both already, as I said, have given written consent. And I will speak to them before anything happens to them and just say, you know, how do you want to move forward? Can I still use you as teaching cases? Or is it, do you just not want me to talk about it anymore? Because to be fair, I think I've got another 30 years left to work. So I'm probably going to be talking about them and their health conditions probably for another 30 years. So the legal requirements then, so within the Data Protection Act that I was talking about earlier, it does very much split it. So there's 4 areas that it's looking at. So, and it's a 50-50 split between the employee and the employer. So in other words, the employee, the healthcare professional, so the nurse, the midwife, the paramedic, the radiographer, the GP, the dentist, whoever it is that's in that situation. So from the employee's point of view, Your legal requirement is that it's in your professional code of conduct, because it doesn't matter what job that you work in within health and social care, there will be a code of conduct. There is a code of conduct for carers. And a lot of people sometimes forget that just because there isn't a PIN number, there is a code of conduct. And the code of conduct is that document that explains the professional behaviours that you're looking for in an individual. So really, it would be in everybody's code of conduct. You know, even me as a teacher, we have a teaching code of conduct. You know, we have PIN numbers exactly the same. You know, and if we're found to have done something incorrectly, then quite understandably that we also can stand and go through investigation. We can have our PIN numbers removed. The police, you know, not popular with some people, sadly, but they equally have their code of conduct. That's what their badge is. You know, they have an individual badge number that's unique to them. If they are found in investigation that they have not met their code of conduct, they can have their badge numbers taken away from them, and they're told, you know, you can't be a police officer anymore. Same for the fire brigade. They have badge numbers as well. If they are found to have committed gross misconduct, so if they've done something that doesn't meet their code of conduct in particular, they equally lose their badge numbers. GPs in particular, and surgeons as well, with the Royal College of Physicians. Pretty much anybody now within health and social care, or anybody equally as you expand it out, really anybody that's coming into contact with members of the public in something that is known as like not an authority position, but like a position of, I can't think of the word, a position of where you're looking after an individual. So in other words, even if it's either a vulnerable adult or a vulnerable child, so you've got this position, you've got this duty of care. That means that you have a code of conduct that floats around with it, and you need to make sure that you are working within that remit. So the other legal requirement then for the employee is that it should be accurate and up to date. That's all the data. How many times have you tried to ring a patient for an appointment, or you've tried to text them to say your medication's waiting at the pharmacy or something like that, and the message isn't delivered, or you can't get through on the phone, and then when you eventually see the patient, they go, oh yeah, I changed my phone number. Okay, great that you've changed your phone number, but you must tell us, you know, we're struggling to get hold of you for an appointment, or to discuss some test results, or to equally remind you that your medication is waiting at the pharmacy for you to collect. So the patient does need to make sure that they've given you the most up-to-date details, but equally it is also your responsibility as the health and social care practitioner, as they come into the appointment with you, as you confirm their name and date of birth, you can say to them, can I just check that your address is still, and read it out to them, and then say, and can I just check we've got your most up-to-date phone number on the records? And if they say, oh no, I've changed, I've moved, or no, I changed my phone number, get it written down, and then get their record updated as well, so that the next time that they come to their appointment, when you check it again, the patient will say, no, that's all still correct, yep, that's still me, I still live there, or that's still my phone number, and then you know that you have done your responsibility to keep them up to date. Right, bear with me, I've just got to let somebody else into the room by the sounds of things. Have a look. Oh, there we go, Angela. Right, let's go back to where we were. Okay, so then the employer's responsibility. So the employers, it is right that it's 50-50 in between the two. I mean, the employer then is saying that the data is going to be safe and secure. So they'll have this great computer system. It will be password protected. Sometimes organisations might use VPN, so virtual private networks, just as an extra layer of security. So anybody that's working out in the community, so going in and out of patients' homes, sometimes when they have their iPads or even their laptops, sometimes they might have a USB dongle that's going to give them the VPN, just to make sure that as they're sending the data across the internet back to base, that it is being sent securely, because the priority there is that it's secure. Sadly, we just live in a world now of computer hacking. My bank account was hacked the other day, and even the bank still don't know how it happened, but the individual that had access to the bank account. I banked with Halifax. Luckily, they were really on it for once. And they texted me straight away and said, is this you trying to spend money? And I was like, for once, no, it's not me trying to spend money. And we were able to stop the payment. And Halifax said, don't worry, we'll send you a new bank card. These things happen. And I thought nothing of it. Within about 10, 15 minutes, I got a phone call on my mobile phone. And as I looked at the phone number, I could see it was a London number. I was like, don't know who that is. Answered it. And this man was pretending he was from Halifax. And I said, why are you ringing from London? He went, that's where our offices are. I said, no, your offices are in Yorkshire, because that's why you've got the name Halifax, and I can see it's your registered address, and all your phone numbers listed on your website are in Yorkshire. Oh, well, you know, we're just in London. We're just, right, okay. He confirmed my full name, my date of birth, and I said, yeah, what's this regarding? He said, oh, there's been some unusual activity on your account. I said, yeah, I know. I said, my bank card's just been frozen. I said, and a new one's been put in the post. And he said, oh, can I just confirm that that's being sent to, and gave my full postal address. And then I started to think, I'm sure this actually isn't my bank, but how has this man got my name, my date of birth, my postal address, my mobile phone number, because he's ringing my mobile phone. So I thought, well, I'll have a conversation and just wait and see. And while I was talking to him on speakerphone, I then opened my banking app where I could start messaging my bank. And I was saying to them, are you on the phone to me right now? And Halifax were like, no, that's not us. Why? What are they saying? And I said, well, they're saying, can you give me the new bank card number that's been sent to you, because we think there's been an error at our end. And Halifax were like, don't give anything to. I said, well, I'm not that silly. I've already realised that this is not you that's on the phone to me. So I strung him on for a little bit, and then very randomly, and probably very silly for him, he said, oh, we don't have your current occupation down. What is it that you currently do? So I did say, I said, but it was a bit of a change for me, really. I said, because I am actually a retired police officer, which is true. And he put the phone down. And I was like, right. Luckily, I'd not given any information to make anything worse. I blocked the number straight away. And then when I rang Halifax back then and said, look, this is everything that's happened, it then got reported to the serious fraud team. I reported it to the police, and then I had everything changed, including my phone number, because even the police said to me, bit worried that they knew everything about you. That's very, very unusual. So clearly, I've given my data to an organisation that's had all that information from me. So it's got to be somebody I pay a bill to, because they have all my card details and like I said, my date of birth and my address and my phone number. Whatever company that is has been hacked. And I'm pretty good with my data, to be fair. You know, I'm not one of these that gets an email with a random link and I click on it like my parents do, and then start putting their bank details into, and then can't understand why they've had bank fraud. I'm not like that. I'm pretty tight with my data, which makes me a bit more suspicious that I think it's quite a big company that has got itself hacked, and perhaps for whatever reason haven't made it public yet. Maybe they're not even aware that it's happened yet. I mean, historically, it's happened to Tesco. It happened to their club card accounts. It has happened to Sainsbury's as well, to their Nectar card accounts. It has been known that it's happened to local councils. So where they've been able to get people's council tax details. So of course, if you pay your council tax by direct debit, so you've given all your information to the council innocently, and then some councils have been hacked. The NHS themselves, they were hacked. The NHS a couple of years ago was held hostage by the hackers. They were blackmailing them, and I think at one point they said, we want £50 million, or we're going to delete everybody's data. And of course, the NHS was absolutely panicking, because it would have just ground to a halt, and it just wouldn't have been able to treat anybody if it lost all the data. So we're well aware that cybersecurity is a problem. It does also become your problem then as the health and social care practitioner, because yes, you need to make sure you're not doing things like, you can't be caught sharing passwords. You shouldn't be doing it anyway. I mean, we moved in the main hospitals, quite a long time ago, we moved to having like a chip and pin on our ID badges. So as I would go into work, I would take my badge. You put your badge into the computer with the chip going into it, and then it unlocks all the pages that are relevant that you need to be able to look at to treat your patient. The moment that you're ready to walk away from the computer because you finished your work, you take your card out, and as you take your card out, it locks all the records and the computer automatically. However, the number of times that I've walked through either wards, A&E, even my own X-ray department, and as I'm walking down the corridor and I just turn and just look at some of the computers, the number of times I've seen cards in the computers with no member of staff around, and I'm like, what are you doing? You have walked away and left it open to absolutely anybody, and if I can see it, that means everybody can see it. You get in trouble for it in my hospital. We had she was matron actually, but she was a really good matron. She would go around on night shift in particular, and any cards that she caught in machines, she didn't care if it was doctors, nurses, radiographers, she didn't care. She would literally just pick them all up, and then she would collect them all in, and then she would send emails for disciplinaries and say, you can come and collect your card back, but you're having a disciplinary at the same time. And if she caught you more than once, she then actually reported it to your professional body and said that you are not looking after this data securely, which goes directly against your code of conduct. So just don't do it. You know, like I said earlier, don't share passwords in particular. It's not worth your code of conduct. Okay, we've then got good practice of handling information. So while I said earlier that technology has helped us, and it really has, it's helped us from a speed point of view in particular, it does cause its own problems. Some people out there are not overly tech savvy, as in they might be quite good at sending a text message, but then as you need them to try and put some really accurate data in, they could make a mistake. So on the image there I've got on one of the iPhones, that's a blood pressure for a patient and a heart rate as well. So the patient's 144/82. We're a little bit high for a systolic blood pressure. But anyway, so they put that into the computer. But actually, what would you do if that's a mistake? What if the patient was 82/144? I mean, they'd be seriously ill if they were. But I mean, that's what happens. Sometimes I've found a lot of the time as well when I've gone to patient records and looked at them, and I'm looking at it thinking, I'm sure there's nothing wrong with that patient. Why is the blood pressure wrong, and why is there an issue there? A lot of people invert numbers, as in they swap them around. It's not a deliberate thing. Sometimes it's a genuine accident. Sometimes if people have different types of dyslexia, or if they have dyscalculia or dyspraxia like I have, you have to be really careful that you haven't flipped numbers around, because again, something as serious as a patient's basic obs, or how many, what measurement of medication they need. So some people don't know the difference between milligrams and micrograms, and of course that's a real serious error. If you muddle those two up as well, it's really dangerous for the patient. So that's why, yes, you might be inputting it electronically, but actually it is absolutely your responsibility to make sure before you press yes, that's correct, that you have actually just double checked and made sure, is that correct? Look at the patient again. Yeah, that's correct. Let it go and send the information through. It does say there that there's a reduced loss of data. The only reason why that's there is in the old days when we used to have patient paper notes, and every time you wanted to put something on the patient notes, often you had to hole punch it and put it in. You'd end up with these like massive set of notes. And then after a while, it might be that the treasury tags had either broken, or the number of times I'd take some patient notes off the shelf and then it would all drop out. And you're like, oh, I haven't got time for this. I've got a busy clinic, and you're trying to put it all back in there and making sure you're getting it in the right order. Technology's taken that away, okay? I mean, that's not a risk anymore, which again means that you're satisfying your code of conduct because you're keeping the records all together accurately and together. It is more sustainable, so it's totally better for the planet. We're not printing out 10,000 sheets of paper or forms or whatever it is that we were doing in the old days. Now we can do it a lot quicker. It does say there that there is a speed element to health apps. There is, but I would be, if you start writing about that for an assignment, be careful with that one. Yes, there is for health apps, providing your patient knows how to use the app. My dad is 77. If you watch him trying to do a text message, it's quite painful. He doesn't really understand apps. So you could be saying to your patient, oh, there's a really good app now to manage your diabetes. We're now going to an electronic, with no more finger pricking. You're going to wear your Dexcom and you just need to put your phone to it and check your blood sugars every day. And the patient's like, all right, that sounds great. I don't have a smartphone. So how do I do it then? Well, you can't. So you'll have to go back to the finger pricking because the Dexcom needs a smartphone. Can't do it with an old-fashioned phone. That it doesn't work. So the patient then is in a dilemma. Am I happy to keep finger pricking? I've done it for years, so I might be okay. Although, you know, I'm starting to get peripheral vascular disease and my fingers are starting to hurt and I'm bleeding a lot and I'm cross-contaminating and blah, 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 blah. Or do I now go out and spend £900 on an iPhone just so that I can get it to work with my Dexcom? It might sound an easy choice for you, but actually for some individuals, there's whole reams of can they afford it? Do they know how to use it? We have a big data poverty problem within the United Kingdom. There are a lot of people out there, yes, go and get smartphones and what's it, because they feel like that they need to invest, but for whatever reason, can't afford data, might not have the internet at home, might not have Wi-Fi. I know every Christmas, if you watch Christmas adverts when they come out at Christmas, last Christmas in particular, quite a lot of the major mobile phone companies were saying give the gift of data for Christmas so that loved ones that might be isolated and on their own could have a video call with their friends and their family, even if they're on the opposite sides of the world. And actually that's a really touching thing to do for somebody, isn't it? You know, if you want to see a grandparent or even a great grandparent, but they are unable to access the internet or they don't have Wi-Fi at home, that you could gift them data so that they could have a phone conversation with you at Christmas. But again, it could just be, I'm going to gift you data so that you can actually make sure that your basic obs are being looked after or that your blood glucose is being monitored, whatever it is that you need a health app for. A lot of women in particular use the health app for, one of the health apps for menstruation. So Flow app, it's called, so they can track their periods. If they're trying to get pregnant, it might be that they're tracking fertility. I know certainly if you go for a course of IVF in particular, that they recommend you download the health app so that you can track your fertility cycle and that you can see what's going on. Menopause, I'm in the menopause following a hysterectomy, so I have a menopause app that keeps track of things like my blood pressure, monitors my symptoms to make sure that my HRT is working correctly, because if I'm suddenly awake at 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm having a hot flush, something's wrong with my HRT, and the surgeon would need to adjust it and make sure that there is not an ongoing issue there. Accessibility, again, is pretty much what I've just said with the speed of health apps as well. Accessibility from the point of view of, can they actually use it? You know, I mean, a lot of patients in particular, particularly with even arthritis in their hands and in their fingertips, if they've got a touchscreen phone, often they can't actually touch it, as in they can't actually get it to respond to them sometimes. It might be, do they need a stylus? Is there a better way? Do they need an old-fashioned one that's got like a bit of a keyboard so that they can try and type things instead? These are all things that you have to think about as a health and social care practitioner. The bottom one then is one called VitalPack and eObs. That is something that we use within the hospital. So VitalPack, we use to take basic observations for patients and then upload it straight away into the computer system. So as we're doing a full set of obs, it's like an electronic news chart. So you put on things like the rest rate, temperature, whether they're on oxygen or not, what their blood pressure is, what their heart rate is, and you get it all uploaded electronically into the computer system. So it has helped. It is a good way forward. It automatically escalates your patient if there is a problem. So it already does the sums that you need to do and works out if your patient's septic or is at the start of the sepsis pathway, and it already alerts the people that you need to contact. So either the consultants need to come out, or it might be that you want your patient referred by a different department, and VitalPack and eObs is able to make that electronic referral to the department that you need. So again, gone are the days of writing a letter, dear sir, please can you come and look at my patient? No, you just press a button now on VitalPack and it will just go straight away. And then whoever it is on call will come out and see your patient. It genuinely has helped us in the hospital. It really has. The only time that we have had problems with it, which technically is not the software fault, but we did have a major broadband outage because there was some roadworks going on in the road, and they decided to dig straight through the data cable that came into the hospital because it just wasn't clearly labelled enough in the ground. And we were without computer systems for about 36 hours. That caused problems because it didn't matter how good VitalPack was, we couldn't connect to anything. And BT took a really, really long time to fix the problem. So some of this we've covered already. Understanding good practice in handling information. I cannot stress this enough. Passwords, and your password shouldn't be password or various different ways of spelling password, as in making a zero the O, or password 1234. I mean, this is how people hack and how people get into it. Passwords shouldn't be reused. They should be unique to yourself. I think when I first started in the hospital in our training, as they were joining us into the new computer system, the first password that we were given to log in with was hospital. And I remember sitting in one of the training sessions going, bit easy to guess, isn't it? That one, you've given us all the same password, but two, the password is hospital. And they went, well, yeah, but the moment you log into the system, it will ask you immediately to change a password to one of your own. So they said that's how we get round it. One of the organisations that I do some work for, it's one of the exam boards that I mark exam papers for. Their computer system sends me an email every 30 days without fail. I have to change my password. Even if I've logged in, not logged in, whatever, I have to change it. You're not allowed to use any of your previous 4 passwords. You must have a mixture of letters, numbers, a special character, and something else in their password. Honestly, every 30 days, and I sit there and think, oh God, I cannot come up with another password that I'm going to be able to remember. And you know the golden rule with passwords, you can't write it down somewhere. Again, a number of times in a hospital, I'd go up to a computer and somebody got a lovely post-it note stuck on either the monitor or the computer itself with their password on it. And you're like, really? It's meant to be secure? So no, please don't do anything like that. Make sure it is something you can remember, but equally something that's not easy for other people to guess. The next one is individual logins. Absolutely. The fact that we've gone to electronic patient notes now, if it's me that's dealt with the patient, then it must be me logged in to do the patient notes, because when I press to say it's complete, it will automatically generate my name and my PIN number to say that it was me that did that. So I cannot give my login to anybody else, because otherwise, I mean, it could look like one day I've done a 24-hour shift in the hospital. It's just unlikely, and it's so dangerous because I would have no idea what somebody was doing under my name. So if anybody says to you, can you just log into this computer for me? So I can't remember my password, or I just need to get some work done. Absolutely don't do it. I don't care if they are your best mate in the whole entire world. Do not do it, because if anything goes wrong, it is the quickest way for you to lose your registration, because they'll call you into the investigation. And the moment you sit there and go, yeah, I logged in for them, they'll say you've not followed your code of conduct, give us your registration, and then that's it. So just honestly, just don't do it. The other way to keep data securely maintained is storage facilities, so cloud. It should be an off-site facility. That's why they're often up in the clouds, where it gets its name from. Things like Apple, do tend to have, if you've got your iCloud, and the idea is that if you log it into another device, you are then able to download your pictures, your contacts, whatever it is that you might need. And then finally, the last one as well, then, this is normally if you've got a work device, it must be encrypted. Now, as Apple has progressed itself over the years, well, in fact, Android as well, we started with fingerprint recognition. Now it's facial recognition. Some are going to voice recognition as well. I know my bank that I was saying about earlier, Halifax in particular, when you ring them, part of their idea as you're going through it is they get you to say a phrase, and they'll tell you what the phrase is, and then you repeat it, and then they can check and say whether that is you or not. I've never had a problem ringing the bank, and it's always been okay until I was poorly with COVID. And I had such a bad chest with it when I got it the first time, and I was really, really poorly, and I could not pass the biometric check with my voice because the bank kept saying to me, not authorized, not authorized, not, and then they kept saying it's not you, and I was like, it is me. I'm just literally dying with COVID. Please let me into my bank account. I need to talk to you about something, and I just couldn't get through it. And then I think the final message from the automated line was, please go into branch and speak to somebody in person. And I was like, well, I can't even do that. I've got COVID, so I'm stuck at home isolated now. So yeah, it's one of those things. It does need to be encrypted, but you do need to make sure that the encryption equally works. And because you don't want to be out on the road trying to deal with a patient and you can't get into your patient records because you can't pass the encryption for whatever reason. Okay, so that when you then describe the practices that ensure security, I mean, again, I've pretty much covered all of these, to be fair. We do say IT is more secure. So again, gone are the days of leaving paper notes, either in a restaurant or there was a midwife locally, actually, to be fair. She'd left a big stack of patient notes on the passenger seat of her car because she was out in the community, so she was driving between appointments. And unfortunately for her, as she slammed her car door, it had sort of blown the top of the paper notes open. And a member of the public walking past just happened to look in her car window, like they do. And as they glanced down, could see the full contact details, name, date of birth, phone number of one of her patients, and so did actually report it. Now, you might think, oh, that was just a bit of bad luck. Yeah, it is a little bit, but actually, go back to your code of conduct. It was her responsibility to keep that data safe. She is out on the road, admittedly, for her job, but that doesn't mean that her responsibility to keep the data safe has changed. If she was going into a shop or perhaps was in with another client, then all the other patient notes, if she couldn't carry them with her, should have been locked securely in her boot. So in other words, away from public eye, because it should be hidden at all times and shouldn't be seen. I've already said don't share logins. Details can be hacked. I've already explained about when the NHS was held hostage with the spyware program, and they tried to blackmail us to get money out of us. Now, the next one, this always makes students chuckle, normally when I'm teaching this face-to-face in class, where I put, how computer literate are your staff? Not meant to be an insulting question. It's just like a genuine question. I mean, as we went more, I'm old enough that I worked in the NHS when we were pretty much completely paper-based. So as we've moved into more technology, as I've watched more and more computer programs come in, now luckily I'm quite tech savvy and I'm okay with it. I did IT at school. I'm in my comfort zone there. But I watched a lot of nursing staff that were working with me just could not use the computer system, and often would call me and ask for help and say, I don't know how to do this, or the screen's frozen, I don't know how to change it, what am I meant to put in that box, where do I put this information, and then that makes it really difficult for you as an organisation. You brought this system in to try and help everybody, but actually inadvertently you've caused a bigger problem for some of your staff. If staff can't use the computer system, you are putting your patients at risk, but you're making your staff member feel undervalued. It might be that your staff member, for whatever reason, doesn't want to ask for help. They could be really embarrassed about it. It might be, there was definitely an age gap between those that could use the new computer system and those that couldn't. So you had really long-term qualified, really experienced staff that for whatever reason perhaps had not used computers quite a lot, and then they were saying, I can't do my job, everything's taking 10 times longer than it used to, and why can't I just go back to paper-based, or if I write it down, can you just type it up for me? I'd love to help you, but no, I can't. You know, it's got to be you that's doing it. It's got to be you that's logged in because these are your patient notes. People just left. You know, they just said, I can't work in this way, or that it's taking me 10 times longer to do anything now than it used to. It's just time for me to retire. That is so sad to watch these really experienced people with this font of knowledge that have done the job for years, just because they can't use a new system that you've brought in, have just thought, oh, it's just easier if I just leave. How many of you, even when you're out shopping, like food shopping, I mean, so you've gone into a supermarket and for whatever reason, you just want to be served by a human being. You don't want to go to the self-checkout. I do sometimes if I've got a voucher, or for some strange reason, if I've got cash with me, because we're predominantly cashless now. But if there's a reason why, I definitely want to go to a human being. I hate the self-checkout. So you're trying to scan something, then it says can't find this item, then you put it down and it says unwanted item in the bagging area, and you're like, I put it in the bagging area, you know. And this is what the frustration that you see sometimes within healthcare. And you see people like really trying to get something to work, and they're saying it's not working, it's frozen, or I've suddenly lost reception and I can't upload something, or I'm trying to open the patient's file and it won't open the information that I need. It doesn't work sometimes. It doesn't work. So just again, be a bit careful when you're writing the assignment for this one. You know, don't just go and say technology is the absolute best thing in the world. You know, it saved everything, it solved all our data problems, everything's working fine now. Because in reality, no, it's not. And actually, there is still some problems floating around out there that really, if you do some research, you'll be able to see the information where individuals are struggling and organisations are struggling. Last one then, only sharing information when you need to and with who. Yeah, we've gone through that. I mean, again, I know when we've looked at it previously, when we talked about safeguarding in particular, I mean, I am old enough in my working career that we didn't used to have a national computer system for the NHS. That's only really happened in the last 3-4 years, maybe. We never used to have a national police database. You know, when you used to have your police check done, so as you know it as a DBS now, when it used to be the CRB, so the Criminal Records Bureau, they would only check with the police force of where you actually lived. So if you lived in Cambridge, they checked Cambridge. That was it. Now we've got the national computer. It will check everywhere. It will also check any locations that you've lived at within the last 5 years. Sometimes if you're going for higher security clearance, I've got a slightly higher one than the normal one, I had to give 10 years. And they looked through 10 years of addresses. When I was in the Home Office in particular, they also did paternal checks. So they checked both my parents and grandparents as well. So that I had to go back 3 generations. And they checked everybody just to make sure that nobody in the family was up to anything illegal or was any terrorist activity or anything like that. So they did go through absolutely everything. And again, only sharing information when you need to and with who you need to. I had to contact all my grandparents, both my parents, and say to them, you know, this is a security clearance check that I need to have done. Do you consent that they can contact you and that they can look at your data? And of course, all of them, I'm very from a close family, there was no problem and it was fine. But it did mean that I had to get their permission before the checks were carried out. And equally, if I hadn't have had the checks done, I couldn't have had the job. So that's why my family consented and said, yeah, there's no problem there. Okay, then the importance of maintaining records that are up to date, complete, accurate, and legible. I've gone over quite a lot of this already as well, to be fair. So I don't think any of this should be a surprise to you. Why is this important? Well, it's literally a patient's life. So you need to make sure it is accurate and correct, particularly with things like medication, because something serious could happen. You literally are at risk of serious harm or, in fact, death of a patient if you have made either a drug error or omission. So in other words, if they should have had their medication and you haven't given it for whatever reason, it could cause loss of the patient. What are the consequences of inaccurate data or illegible writing? So this is another reason why we've gone to electronic notes, because gone are the days where you would look at a doctor's handwriting and spend ages staring at it, trying to figure out what are they actually saying, what actually needs to be prescribed to this patient. So it has made it a lot easier. The consequences if they can't read it, or if it is illegible, if it is still handwritten for whatever reason, if it goes to court, that is where it becomes difficult, because they will be saying to you, what does that say? And you'll be looking at it going, I can't read it. Okay, so can you tell us what happened then? I can't remember. You know, you don't ever want to be in that situation if you're giving evidence. Okay, last bit then, confidentiality. I'm just going to have a little bit of water. Okay, the actual meaning of the word confidentiality then. So its real definition, if you look it up in the dictionary, it is the fact of private information being kept secret. Okay, so it might be that sometimes if you signed a contract for a new job, sometimes when the letter comes out from HR, it might say on the envelope, private and confidential. That means because it's for you, not for everybody. Whatever's in that envelope is for you. And it's the same when you're dealing with patients. It is confidential. You are not there to have a discussion with their relative or their loved one unless they've given you permission. It might be sometimes if you're delivering bad news to somebody in particular, then they say, can I bring somebody with me to the appointment? Of course you can. And then as soon as that person walks in, particularly if it's somebody you've never met before, you then say to your patient, we are going to discuss your results, your medical results or your medical history. Is it okay for me to say it in front of whoever it is that they've brought with them? And then the patient again will consent to that information being shared within that room. But it is very much that it's within that room. It always makes me laugh with confidentiality in the NHS, because over the years, in all the training that I've done with where I've trained individuals within healthcare, when I go out into the hospital to assess them and to watch their work and to watch what they do, and they are in a ward setting in particular, so they've gone to the hospital bedside to tell a patient something or to discuss on it with the patient's care, and then they close the blue curtains. And then people seem to think that for whatever reason that those curtains are magical in the hospital because they're completely soundproof, because they'll close the curtains and go, right, so we've discovered that it is actually cancer that you've got and it is stage 4. And then the person in the bed next to them has heard absolutely everything that's been said. They're not confidential. If you are in a situation where you need to have a very serious conversation with a patient, perhaps you do need to either deliver bad news, or you need to give an update on some test results maybe, or some treatment plans, or even something as sad as going to them and saying, I'm very sorry, there's no more treatment that we can do. That is a confidential conversation. The ideal is that you should be able to move them to a location that is confidential. So often we would have a side room. Sometimes we would have a clinical room that we could call the patient down, or perhaps push them down in a wheelchair, and then bring them into the room and have a really serious conversation with them. Sometimes you genuinely can't do that. If they are in their hospital bed and they are unable to get out of that bed for whatever reason, then it might be that you have to have that conversation with others around. You just need to reduce your volume in particular as much as possible. You need to try and be very brief and to the point with what you're explaining. You don't need to go in and go through like 10 years of stuff, because don't forget there could be people in that clinical area that can hear everything that you're saying. But equally, a lot of hospitals, because of where they are geographically, it might be that somebody that is around that clinical area that can hear everything that you're saying perhaps knows the patient or knows the relative of a patient. And if you have told them something really confidential that they don't want anybody else to know, but it's a conversation that's been overheard, it again could also be your fault that it's been overheard. I mean, one of the most important things in particular is you ring your own GP surgery. How many times have you rung the GP surgery and the reception, and they do an amazing job, GP receptionists, because they work really as triage nurses, but then you say to them, can I have an appointment to see my doctor, please? Yeah, what's it regarding? Well, I need an appointment to see the doctor. Yeah, but what's it regarding? Well, that's private between me and the doctor. Well, it is but I actually need to know because I need to work out, is it an urgent appointment? Is it a 10-minute appointment, a 15-minute appointment, a 20-minute appointment? My GP surgery, because they are struggling with being overloaded with appointments at the moment, you can only speak to your GP about one health condition. You're not allowed to go in with multiple things just because you're just so overexcited that you've actually got a face-to-face GP appointment that you'll now talk to them about multiple things that you think are wrong. You get one appointment for one condition. If there are more than one condition that you need to talk about, then that's fine. But then the receptionist will say, well, I've booked you a double appointment or a triple appointment, or just come in and we'll go with the whatever issue is the strongest that you feel is the most important one. We'll deal with that one first. And then the GP will then make another appointment to then talk about the subsequent ones. Because equally, it could be something that they're all connected to each other, maybe. Or it could genuinely be 3 or 4 different health conditions that need to be discussed. And then, as I've said there, you know, it can be embarrassing sometimes. I mean, if we need an emergency appointment in GP surgery, we now have to queue up at 8:30 in the morning. And I kid you not, as I drive down to GP surgery, you can just see this queue of people outside. So as you're all queuing and going in, as the receptionist is then talking to people through her little window, everybody in the queue can hear what you're there for. I'm not embarrassed about anything, genuinely, you know, and I'm pretty sure that everybody in my GP surgery has no idea who I am. So therefore, I'm not bothered by anything. But actually, you can imagine that some people are quite bothered by things. This could be perhaps a vulnerable patient. This could be somebody perhaps that's had to go in because of something serious like a sexual assault, or going in for a blood test because they think they might have HIV. You know, you have no idea sometimes what your patient has come in with. So you do need to be a bit respectful around confidentiality. And you do need to be careful in making sure that if they don't feel that they can say what they need to say in a confidential environment, that you need to then find somewhere that is confidential for them, or even say to them, you know, is there a different way that we can have this conversation? And sometimes patients say, actually, I'd prefer to email you, or I will write it down, or I would rather receive the information in a written format instead of you ringing me and saying it over the phone. Because I don't want anybody else to know, or whatever. And you must respect the patient's wishes. You must. It's always patient choice, always. Sometimes you might not agree with that choice, but actually it is, again, in your code of conduct and your code of practice that it is patient choice, unless there's a real serious medical reason why not. If they want something and it's not in their best interest, then you have to have a conversation with them and try and explain why. I've already said about the blue curtains. Yeah, it does make me laugh, the people that genuinely think that they're soundproof. I've seen it so much over the years. So how do we share information? So I've already just given you some examples of them. So you've got oral reports, written reports, forms and documents. It might be a presentation. So we used to have in our hospital, we used to have something called MDM meetings, so multidisciplinary team meetings. Anytime a patient was diagnosed with cancer, wherever the location was in the body of the cancer, we would have a multidisciplinary team meeting that was specialist to that area. So if the patient had lung cancer, we had a lung multidisciplinary team. And we would go to those meetings. They were often in lunchtime. There was a huge team because the Macmillan nurses were there, the consultant was there, there was always an oncologist in the room, there was always somebody from clinical imaging in the room. That's often why I was there, to talk about the imaging that had shown the cancer, or screen the cancer to see had it spread anywhere, you know, where had it gone. Often there were surgeons there to see, are we going to operate first, or are we going straight in for chemo, or is there nothing that we can do, so we're now going palliative? You know, this is a whole team of people that would go through. So we would sit in almost like a boardroom type setting, really, but in other words, somewhere that had a really massive screen, and we would literally present onto the screen all the patients' test results, and we could look at the imaging. We were able to zoom in if we were trying to stage a cancer. So we could get there was like a little electronic ruler that we could put up on the screen so we could measure the size and shape of the tumour, figure out where it had gone. We would get the most up-to-date blood work and get that up on the screen to try and work out, was it in the lymph nodes? Is it spreading around the body? Is this a first cancer, or actually is this a secondary tumour? And we would spend a long time planning that patient's treatment plan. That's what the MDMs were there for. And then we would talk about those patients throughout the whole of their treatment, and only at the point that treatment was ending, either because it was successful, which is what we always wanted, or if it wasn't successful and there was nothing else that we could do, we always took that patient back to that MDM meeting to talk about what had worked, what hadn't worked. And actually, then at the point of, sadly, there's going to be no further treatment that we can do for this patient, then of course the Macmillan nurses are there. A counsellor used to come a lot of the time as well. And we would then say, we are going to break the bad news to the patient. We're calling them in tomorrow, or we've asked the GP to do it, or we've got the patient coming into a clinic or whatever, and we're going to do it then. Everything that we would discuss at those meetings was fully documented as well, because it's minuted. So it's like a proper meeting, because it was all minuted and typed up. And we would have a typist there that would, all of us that were speaking, she would be keeping track of it all and minuting everything and saying, the doctor says this, the radiographer says that, the surgeon says it. That's how it always functions. It's just one of those things that goes on behind the scenes in the NHS that I think sometimes people aren't aware of. Graphs and tables, pretty self-explanatory, really. It might be that we're showing to a patient, this is where your viral load is, this is where it could be, or, we like a scale, so the BMI chart in particular. So it could be that we're showing them something on the BMI chart saying you're currently here, but with this diet, we could get you to here, or with these bulk up drinks, you're currently here and we need to get you up to here to a safe, healthy weight, whichever way round it is we're going. Leaflets and posters. Sometimes when you're talking to a patient and you perhaps are trying to explain to them, this is going to be what your treatment is, this is what we recommend, or something as simple as they've come in with a broken leg and we've put a plaster cast on it, and we give them a leaflet saying this is how to keep it dry and make sure that you can have a bath at home and stay clean, because it's important that you look after your personal hygiene, but this is how to manage your broken leg and to deal with it. So we give them a leaflet sometimes and explain. Web pages and social media. Now, again, it depends how you feel about social media. I'm very 50-50. It has its place in the world. However, it is the root cause of evil for quite a lot of things in particular. For us in the NHS, we are allowed to put things on social media if we've got these explicit written consent from the patient. So if you want to be photographed with your patient for whatever reason, it might be that they're ringing the bell at the end of their cancer treatment and they've asked for a picture. Yeah, that's fine. But the patient's got a consent if you're then going to put it on your website or put it out on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, saying, yeah, my patient finally has beaten cancer. I'm so proud of them. I've got to say, it's pretty much the same for me in teaching, to be honest. If I take a class picture, for whatever reason, we were out the other week doing a charity beach clean. So there's 14 of us on the beach with litter pickers picking up all the rubbish. I had to get written consent from all 14 students to say that they were happy that went on the college's social media page. They all signed and said, yeah, that's fine. But if at any point, and it is on the form that they signed, that it says if at any point they want that removing, we have to remove it. So as soon as a student writes in and says, I don't consent anymore, I want to withdraw it, that picture has to come down. If it's only one student out of 14, it might be that the IT department just blur their face out and just make it obvious that it's not them, because that's the one that's withdrawn the consent. Those of you, any of you that have children, I know it's becoming quite difficult on things like sports day. So things where you want to take pictures of your child and you're really excited that they're doing really well in a race or that they've won a trophy or something like that. And it's really difficult because you have to make sure that no other child's face is in it. So you either have to put something over the face electronically or blur it out. Or what is really sad is a lot of people now just won't take a picture. And it is quite sad, really, because you want to celebrate your own child's achievement, but the difficulty is it's because of everybody else that's in the background. Right, last one then. This is the hardest bit. It is important that breaking confidentiality is devastating for the individual, for the patient. Okay, you do not want a patient to walk into a setting and then somebody nudges somebody else and goes, "Oh, that's the patient that they were talking about." Nobody wants that. You've only got to look at stuff, and I appreciate it is in America, but you've only got to look at stuff that's going on in America at the moment, where they've made abortion illegal, which of course is going to push it underground like it used to be in this country in the 50s and 60s. I mean, it is quite dangerous, but they because it's illegal in some states and it's legal in others, it is already causing problems over there. There was a newspaper article only a couple of months ago, because I know we were talking about it at the college, where the Flow app that I was telling you about earlier, the one that women use sometimes to track their periods and track their menstruation, the Flow app was actually hacked in America, and they were using the data to see who was having an illegal abortion. So this is the problem with organisations taking data from people. There is this serious connotation that goes with it, that this data absolutely must be kept securely, because something as simple as that they've gone and hacked this app where women are just merrily putting in their period dates just to try and work out their menstruation, but actually now could be arrested for having an illegal abortion if the Flow app realised that they were there. Even something as simple as you've Googled on your phone, where is my nearest abortion clinic? And you've clicked on it and looked at the details and what's it. In America, they would write to Apple and get Apple to download your search history. It is something we can do in the police in this country. A lot of people say we can't. I 100% tell you now that we can. You've only got to look at, if you are watching, if you like to watch national news in the UK for health and social care in particular, you must be aware of the child nurse that's currently on trial, Lucy Letby, the young qualified nurse that they believe has murdered, I think it's about 30 children. It's not a small number, it's quite a high number. And actually part of her court case is that the parents of the children, the babies in particular that have been murdered, or alleged murdered, I should say, she had been found that when the police went and got her computer and her mobile phone and seized the devices and went through her Facebook in particular, they could see in her Facebook history that she had been searching up the grieving parents. Now, I'm asked a lot about that case by my other students, because they always ask for my opinion from police head, but also NHS head, to see how I feel. I've got to be honest, I'm very 50-50 about that case as well. I as a health and social care practitioner, I want her to be innocent, because I think all of us that train, individuals like yourself that are studying to go into that world and to work in that environment, I just don't believe, if you've studied as a health and social care practitioner, I just don't believe it's in you to murder somebody, because otherwise why are you being a health and social care practitioner? Our Hippocratic oath states that we will not cause undue harm to individuals. So from that point of view, I think she's innocent. However, from a police point of view, there's a lot of behaviour that is not appropriate. And again, looking at parents, writing, she's written a lot of very, very damning statements, text messages in between her and her work colleagues. She tried to delete a lot of evidence. And again, it's very easy for the police to be able to recover that evidence. That's really not difficult. You can even buy an off-the-shelf computer program that where you think you've deleted stuff from your mobile phone. Trust me, it's not deleted, and you can get software that can undelete that. So yeah, that's going to be a really interesting case to follow, because it's getting near the end of the case, because it's gone on for quite a long period of time. Now, the court case has gone on forever. The poor jury that are going to have to now look at all the evidence again and decide whether she is guilty or innocent, and they're going to have to remember stuff back to last October. I feel really sorry for the 12 men and women on the jury, to be honest, because that is just a really, really hard case to deal with. The other reason why you can't break your confidentiality, and I've put there, it might create a barrier between you and your patient. You want your patient to trust you in the hope that you form a nice professional relationship with them, as in that they can come to you with a problem and you hopefully will try and solve that problem for you. The moment the trust is gone, they will never trust you again. They may forget over time and they may forgive slightly over time, but they won't trust you. They'll be convinced. And again, I've had this when I've worked with children, when a child told me something and I've then had to do a safeguarding report, which is my job. But then when I see the child again, I've had one say to me before, I'm telling you nothing because you go away and report it. And when I said to them, but I have to, that's my job. And they went, no, you shouldn't have reported it. But I can't keep secrets. That is against my code of conduct, my code of practice. I'm not allowed. It's against all my safeguarding training. We're not allowed to keep secrets. Well, I'm telling you nothing. I really couldn't treat that patient anymore, and actually would make sure pretty much after that point that every time they came into the department, because they were a frequent flyer that was in quite a lot of the time, I always, if I could, got somebody else to look after that patient, because I didn't want the patient thinking that they couldn't tell me anything, because I didn't want the patient to keep a secret from me, not if it was detrimental to their healthcare. I wanted them to be able to tell me what was wrong and how this had happened, and what you needed to do. It does make it really hard for you sometimes. Okay, last bit then, assignment, because you know that we love an assignment. So you've got to do a portfolio of evidence again. And this time you've got to include a guidance document and a briefing report. Okay, so you are doing a presentation file and speaker notes of 500 words. And then you need to write a written accompanying report that goes with that presentation of 1,500 words. So the scenario is you are having a very lengthy and detailed inspection. The health and social care setting you work at has been asked to review their approaches to the handling and storage of information, and there is a specific focus on personal and confidential information. Now, again, remember what I've said to you on previous assignments. If you are not currently working in health and social care, if you are working somewhere, or equally, if you have been into some organisation that has your data, so something as simple as your doctors, your dentists, your hairdressers, if you go to the gym all the time, so it might be your gym's got all these contact details, then if you are not already working in this environment, just try and think about an organisation that has your data and how they look after it, and that will help you write this assignment, okay? Your assignment all the way through should be referenced, and it should be in the Harvard format. Don't forget word counts, don't include references, don't include any diagrams as well. So you might find for this in particular that a diagram might be really useful for this assignment. Well, that's not included in your word count, so that's fine. You can put as many diagrams in as you want. If you find that you're going to go over your word count, or find that you perhaps might need either I'm trying to think, like a workflow template or something like that, then by all means put that in an appendix at the end. It just means that it is included in your assignment, as in your marker will look at it and will be able to see that you've included that information, but it doesn't go into your word count, so that you do get the full 1,500 words, because to be fair, you're probably going to need that amount of words for this assignment. Okay, so this is a bit more information about the presentation. Okay, so it is a presentation that's going to be used for staff training. So within this presentation, you should cover the legislation that relates to data protection, which are the ones that I gave you at the start of tonight's lesson. You need to talk about the code of practice. So you do need to talk about it from the NMC point of view, but also the HCPC. So don't just do one of them, make sure that you do both of them. You need to explain the legal requirements and code of practice for handling of information in health and social care. So again, you've already identified the legislation. So it might be that you said Data Protection Act of 2018, but it might be then you need to further expand it and then explain what does that law actually mean? What does it actually cover, or what doesn't it cover, if you find that easier. For the codes of practice, and again, I've given you 2 examples of both codes of practice, and I've explained what sections you need to be looking at to find that information. You then need to further describe how manual and electronic information storage systems are securely maintained. So that comes back to your passwords and your encryption that I said about earlier. You need to describe the practices that ensure security when storing and accessing information. So again, passwords, as in don't share passwords with each other. Make sure computers are locked if you're not using them, so other people can't get access to them. It might be that you talk about encryption or something like that. You then need to explain the importance of maintaining records that are up to date, complete, accurate, and legible. Again, I've given you multiple examples tonight, so don't forget I am recording this lesson, and the recording will be on Teams. So when you're at the point that you're writing this assignment, you can go back to it at any point if you just think, what did Caroline say about that, or how did she explain it? You then need to explain the meaning of the term confidentiality and how it relates to health and social care. You then have to discuss how to maintain and promote the confidentiality in day-to-day communication. So it might be that you talk about how you talk to a patient, or how you refer a patient to a different department, how you do it confidentially, or how you make sure that the communication is kept to the minimum, but equally that you haven't kept it so minimum that you've missed really important information from it. You need to make sure that all the information is there. And then lastly, you need to describe the potential tension between maintaining an individual's confidentiality and disclosing information. That really comes back to safeguarding, the bit that I was just talking to you about, is that, like the last slide on the PowerPoint really, this where you may get caught in conflict with a patient, where it might be they've disclosed something to you and you've had to report it, or you've had to have a conversation with somebody else and say, look, I've got a funny feeling that my patient's told me something that either isn't true or is something that I'm concerned about, that I now need to either report to the police or report to the safeguarding board, or get somebody else to look into that case and see what it is that's going on. But then you also need to include the repercussions that might have for the patient. We've had another similar scenario that I could think of, is that if we've had a patient come into the hospital that we suspect has been victim of a sexual assault, sometimes, not always, but sometimes they say to us, don't report it to the police. I don't want it reporting, particularly if it's a rape case. And they say, I don't know who the individual was. I don't want to go through the hassle of a police investigation. I just want to forget that this has ever happened to me. I'm just not willing to engage with the police at all. Can you keep that secret? No, you can't. And you can't, and it is difficult. But then equally, the police, believe it or not, we don't need a victim to go ahead with a case for us to continue the case. When we take statements, it might be in that situation if we've got DNA evidence in particular. So if we've taken a sample from the patient, from the victim, so it could be skin cells from under fingernails. It could be, if it was a sexual assault in particular, it might be that we've got semen that we're able to send off for profiling. And once we've got a DNA profile, if we then upload that profile to the National DNA Database, if it matches with somebody, then we actually don't need the victim of the rape case at all. It might be that they will give a statement, but they won't go to court and give evidence, which is fine, and you can't force them to do that. But equally, you don't need them to secure a prosecution. It's a weird misconception. I think a lot of people, I think there used to be an old saying that there was no such thing as no victim of crime. Well, yeah, there is actually. I mean, it could be that something's happened to somebody, for whatever reason the victim is not willing to engage and is not willing to come forward. Then you go to the Crown Prosecution Service and you say to them, I feel I've got enough evidence to go ahead, and actually I don't need the victim to give evidence because we've got DNA evidence, and actually that is 99.9% accurate, that we've got the right person, and in which case the CPS will say, yeah, that's fine, you can proceed, and we're willing to charge the individual without putting the victim through the trauma of having to go through and give evidence. If you've never been in a courtroom, it is horrible. That, you know, they're not nice places. Even when you've done nothing wrong and you're giving evidence, I mean, you are really, really grilled by the barristers, and they really, you know, they constantly ask information, and it can be quite grueling, and it can go on for quite a few days as well. So equally, when you're writing this presentation that you're then expected to give to staff members within your team to help make them aware of this, I think you really need to really emphasize, you know, if you don't follow these steps, this could potentially be a legal matter. This could be a court case. This could be that you're going to lose your professional registration. So you need to be really, really clear in what you're saying. Don't frighten them. Don't put a slide in the presentation that says, if you don't do this, you're going to prison. But just find that nice medium that actually whoever it is that is marking this piece of work will actually look at it and go, yeah, it's a really serious consequence. You know, they've made the individual really aware of the importance of maintaining accurate records and equally protecting an individual's data. So just a little recap then. So you've got the presentation file itself and then the speaker notes. So think about what you would actually say if you were delivering that presentation. That's about 500 words. And then the report itself that's written on it is much bigger, because that's about 1,500 words. Please don't forget to reference. I know referencing doesn't come naturally to some people. I've said to you guys before, if you're struggling with referencing, or if you find that when your work's being marked that you're pulled up on referencing a lot of the time, you can always ask for help. I've got some like easy ways to work referencing out. When students submit work to me and say, oh, I couldn't find the reference, I couldn't find who wrote it, then if you really can't find it, why are you using that reference? Do not reference Wikipedia. It is written by general members of the public. It is often not factually correct, and you shouldn't be using it for anything. So if you have found on previous assignments that you keep using Wikipedia, stop it immediately. And if you progress on to university to do a degree, if they catch you doing Wikipedia in one of your assignments, they tend to not mark it at all, because they'll say that you've not used factually correct information. You need to redo the piece of work. And if you've written a 6,000 word essay for them, you don't want to have to redo that piece of work. Right, that's about it really. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think we'll go for that one. Has anybody got any questions that they can think of? Let me just open the little chat box in case you need to type it in case you don't want to talk. All right. Like I said, don't forget, as always, this session is recorded for you guys. So you are able to look back on it whenever you need to, and just like go through some of the information that I've given, or you might want to use some of the case studies that I've mentioned, or think, oh, I'll go and research that and see if I can find the case that Caroline's talking about. By all means, do so with my blessing. They're all easy to find. I will also put, I think it's on there already, but I'll double check in a minute, but I will put my presentation from tonight up on the Teams page for you as well, so that you can have a look and go through the slides if you need to. But it was a much smaller one tonight, because this unit is just a lot smaller than the first two that I did with you guys. All right. Good luck with everything. Okay. If you need anything, honestly, just message. I mean, I finished a little bit early tonight, so I'm going to hang around. I'll hang around till about 8 o'clock tonight. So if you want to ask something and you don't want to ask it in the group, that's fine. I'm going to keep Teams logged on. So just ping me a message and I'll answer as soon as I can. All right. I'm just going to stop the recording so that you don't just get 15 minutes of me just